Let me tell you something, man. There are some topics you grow up hearing about your whole life, but you never really sit down and study them. You just kind of pick up pieces. A movie here, a church sermon there, some old lady on the porch saying, "Baby, the world's ending soon." And you think you understand it. You think, yeah, Judgment Day, end of the world, scary stuff, got it. But then I started learning about how Islam talks about the end of times, and let me tell you something. I was not ready because the way Islam breaks it down, it ain't like no Hollywood movie. It ain't like no vague spiritual metaphor. It's like God handed humanity a roadmap with checkpoints, timelines, characters, events, and this thing called signs that unfold one by one like dominoes falling across history. And I'm reading this stuff like, hold up. Why does this sound way too specific? Because I'm used to end of times talk being all cloudy and poetic like darkness will rise, the seas will roar, mankind will tremble. But Islam goes, all right, here's what's going to happen. First this, then this person shows up, then God's going to take the soul of every believer, then the sun's going to rise from the west. I'm looking around like, who wrote this? A prophet or a screenwriter? And see, the first thing that shook me was this whole thing about the Dajjal, what Muslims call the Antichrist. Not just a bad man, not a villain, not a political leader with a bad haircut, a literal deceiver who shows up claiming to be God on earth. And Islam says he's going to trick people with miracles, fake paradise, fake hell, control weather, control wealth, and get people to bow down to him because he gives them what they want. And when I read that, I said, man, that sounds like every crooked leader, every corrupt celebrity, every manipulative influencer rolled into one. That ain't a fairy tale, that sounds like a preview. And what really messed me up is Islam says the people who follow the Dajjal ain't going to be dumb. They're going to be people who lost their connection to truth, people who just want comfort, not faith. People who want somebody to fix the world for and instead of somebody who calls them to stand up and fix themselves. I said, well, ain't that the world we living in right now? But see, Islam doesn't just talk about evil showing up. It says God is going to send protection too. And that's where the return of Jesus comes in. Now, that threw me off because I grew up in a Christian household, and we always heard Jesus was coming back. But nobody ever told me that Muslims believed the same thing. Not kind of, not sort of, not their version. They believe Jesus is going to come back for real with his real body. The same Jesus that was born to Mary. The same Jesus that healed the blind and raised the dead. The same Jesus that never claimed to be God, but taught people to worship God. They say he's coming back not as a new prophet, not as a messenger, but as a judge. And when Islam said Jesus is going to return and destroy the Dajjal and lead the world into justice, I sat there like, wait, so you'll been waiting on Jesus too, and nobody told us this. And then just when I thought I had processed enough, Islam hits me with this thing called Gog and Magog. Now, normally you hear that in the Bible. It sounds like the name of two rock bands from the 80s. But Islam describes them like a real nation or army trapped behind a barrier somewhere in this world. And when God releases them, they come pouring out like a flood, wrecking everything in their path, overwhelming humanity until even Jesus and his followers have to retreat and pray for God's help. I'm sitting there like, man, y'all got a whole apocalypse storyline with characters, events, and phases. And it was written 1,400 years ago before nukes, before satellites, before artificial intelligence, before internet wars, before population explosion. And this is sounding way too prophetic to be ignored, and here's the part that really made me stop joking and start thinking. Islam doesn't describe the end of times like a fantasy, it describes it like a warning. It says the signs are already showing that the world won't end suddenly. It will decline slowly morally, spiritually, socially, families falling apart, greed becoming normal, lies outshining truth, leaders becoming corrupt, knowledge disappearing, people bragging about sin, children disrespecting parents, wrong being celebrated, right being mocked. And I said, man, we ain't headed into that world, we're already living in it. And that was only the first layer. Because the more I kept reading, the more I realized this ain't just a story about the end of the world. It's a story about the test before the end. A test that every generation is walking through right now without even realizing. So now I'm neck deep in this stuff, flipping pages, watching lectures, trying to figure out how a religion from the 7th century got this level of detail about events that look like they fit right now. And one thing kept hitting me over and over. Islam doesn't talk about the end of times like it's some faraway disaster. It talks about it like a mirror, like the world is already drifting toward the finish line, one choice at a time. It doesn't just say Dajjal's coming one day. It says you're living in the pre-Dajjal world right now. The values, the culture, the confusion, the hunger for fame, the obsession with money, the worship of celebrities, all of that is the rehearsal. And when I realized that, man, I had to lean back in my chair like, oh, so you're telling me everything we call modern and advanced might just be the warm-up show for the biggest scam in human history? Because here's how Islam explains it. The Dajjal doesn't show up randomly, the world gets ready for him. Truth gets watered down, religion becomes a fashion statement. People believe whatever feels good, not what's true. Folks start saying, there is no right, there is no wrong. Everything is just perspective. Families break, loyalty fades, love becomes temporary, and attention becomes the new currency. People stop asking, is this right, and start asking, how many views does it get? And that's when I really got chills. Because Islam says one of the signs of the end is when lies spread faster than truth, and when people build platforms instead of character. I said that's literally the internet, that's social media, that's half the world right now, and then I came across something even crazier. Islam says there will come a time when people won't just follow the Dajjal, they'll love him, they'll celebrate him, they'll defend him, they'll say he's fixing the world. And I pause because don't we already do that with politicians, with billionaires, with celebrities, with influencers who don't believe in nothing but profit? We live in a generation where the moment somebody gives us convenience, we stop asking about character. He made life easier for me, so I don't care what he stands for. That's the kind of mindset that opens the door for a deceiver. And Islam calls the Dajjal the greatest deceiver in history. Not because he forces people, but because he feeds their desires. He tells the world, I'll give you heaven right now. Just don't ask about truth, and people will run to him like he's salvation. But the part that brought everything full circle was this. Islam says when Jesus returns, he doesn't come back preaching a new religion. He doesn't come back saying follow me instead of God. He doesn't come back to start Christianity 2.0. He comes back and says, I never asked you to worship me. I told you to worship the one who sent me. And Islam says Jesus breaks the cross, not because he hates Christians, but because he's correcting the story. He clears his name, he ends the lies told about him. He doesn't come back as a symbol, he comes back as the truth. And when I tell you that... Right there hit me like a truck, man. I grew up with Jesus as the center of my life, and now I'm reading a religion that says the real Jesus, the one I always loved, the one I always prayed to, the one I always believed was a man of God, that same Jesus is coming back, and Muslims and believers from everywhere will stand behind him together. And I'm thinking, why did nobody teach us that? Why did nobody tell us Islam and Christianity aren't enemies at the end? They're allies against evil. Why didn't anybody ever say the Quran talks about Jesus more times by name than the Bible does? Why did nobody ever mention that Mary has a whole chapter named after her in the Quran? How come the only version of Islam I ever saw was the one painted by fear, not facts? And I started realizing maybe the problem ain't the religion. Maybe the problem is the people who profit from us never learning the truth. So now I'm sitting here realizing I spent decades hearing about Armageddon in vague language, but Islam breaks it down like a court case. What happens, who shows up, what God does, who survives, where people run, how the world collapses, how the skies change, how death itself gets removed temporarily so people can see the full consequences of their choices. It's not a legend, it's not a metaphor, it reads like history that just hasn't happened yet, and that's when something in me clicked. This ain't a horror story, it's a wake-up call, not about fear, but about direction. Like God is saying, I'm telling you how it ends so you can choose where you stand before it begins. Now, here's the part that really got into my chest, because once you read enough of this stuff, you stop thinking about the end of the world like it's some movie explosion in the sky, and you start realizing the end of times is really just the final exam of the world we already living in. Islam ain't just talking about earthquakes and monsters and signs in the sky. It's talking about the condition of the human heart. It's saying the world don't fall apart because God suddenly destroys it. World falls apart because people stop caring about truth, and then God lets him see what that world looks like, and the more I sat with that, the more it hit me. This whole life is a test not of how rich you get, not how famous you are, not how comfortable you live, but whether you can stay truthful in a world that's begging you to lie, whether you can stay humble in a world built on showing off, whether you can stay grateful when everything around you tempts you to complain, whether you can stay faithful when everything around you tells you to doubt. And that's when I realized something deep. The end of times ain't scary for the people who live right. It's scary for the people who spent their whole lives thinking this world was home. Because if you don't believe in anything beyond the money, the status, the body, the ego, then of course the end sounds terrifying. It's the end of your only world. But if you believe this life is temporary and the next life is forever, then the end ain't a tragedy. It's a transition. It's not God taking your world away. It's God showing you the real one, and I'll be honest with you, that humbled me because most of us, including me, we live like we're going to be here forever. We get mad over little stuff, chase things that won't even matter next year, break relationships over pride, drown in stress over bills, get jealous over people who don't even think about us, like we forgot we all got an expiration date. See, Islam says, when the end comes, you don't get to rewrite your story, you only get to face it, not in front of Twitter, not in front of a court, not in front of your friends, in front of God. And when I read that, I had to put the book down and just breathe, because the way the world is today, man, we are masters at editing our lives. We crop the pain out the picture. We filter the truth. We build a character online and hope nobody sees the real us. But Islam is saying there's going to come a day where there's no hiding, no acting, no image, no PR team. Just you, your deeds, and the one who saw everything you thought nobody saw. And then it hit me even harder. If the world really is heading toward those final signs, and let's be real, it sure feels like it, then the smartest thing a person can do right now ain't panic, it's prepare. Not by building bunkers, not by collecting canned food, but by cleaning up the inside, fixing the heart, fixing the prayer, fixing the habits, fixing the relationships, fixing the arrogance. Islam says the greatest protection in the end times ain't a weapon, it's faith. Not the kind of faith you talk about when life is good, the kind you hold on to when the whole world goes dark and you still say God is enough for me. That's what separates the people who fall for the Doyle from the people who follow Jesus when he returns. Not religion on paper, faith and practice. And the more I think about it, the more I realize a whole lot of people don't need a sign from the sky. They need a sign from their own life. Because if you're lying, cheating, gossiping, chasing attention, destroying your soul for likes and applause, man, you already living in the wrong direction. The end times ain't just something coming. For some folks, it already started inside. You don't need Gog and Magog to destroy society. Just pride, greed, and faithlessness can do it faster than any army. And I'll be real with you. If there's one thing I learned from digging into all this, it's that God didn't warn us about the end to scare us. He warned us to wake us up, because every soul that hears the truth and changes, even a little, is a soul that won't be lost when the test becomes real. And man, I don't care how much money you got, how many followers you got, how many trophies you won. When that final chapter opens up, the only flex that matters is whether God smiles at you or turns away. So, if there's one thing I'd say after learning all this, it's this right here. Don't wait for the world to fall apart before you start fixing your soul. Don't wait for the sun to rise from the west, or for Dal to walk the earth, or for Jesus to descend before you finally say, "All right, God. Now I'm ready." Because the truth is the end of the world ain't the real deadline. Your deadline is the day your heart stops beating. That's your personal day of judgment. That's the moment where the money stays, the fame stays, the body stays, the followers stay, the house stays, and only your deeds go with you, and that makes you realize something powerful. The end of times might not be in 1,000 years. It might not be in 100, but your end could be tonight. And if that don't wake you up, nothing will. And I'm not saying all this to preach. I ain't saying I'm perfect. I'm saying it because every time I learn something like this, it shakes me a little more awake, makes me look at my attitude, my ego, my prayer, my mistakes, my time. Because if God wrote this whole final chapter in advance, and he still gave us a chance to change before it comes, then that's not punishment, that's mercy. And the smartest people in the end won't be the ones who guessed the date or decoded the prophecies. It'll be the ones who lived every day like they knew they were going to meet God soon, and they wanted to meet him clean. So before the world ends, fix the world inside you. Before the big smoke covers the sky, clear the darkness in your heart. Before the Dajjal tries to fool the world, stop letting the Dajjal of your desires fool you. Because the return of Jesus ain't just a prophecy, it's a reminder. Truth always comes back, light always returns, and every lie, every false king, every fake god eventually falls. The only thing that survives is faith.